Hello, welcome to this video series where I'm going to talk about how I made this Roubo Workbench. Hello, welcome to this exciting episode on Dovetails, and in particular houndstooth dovetails, which you can see marked out here. This is going to be a long one, I'm really sorry, so please go and get yourself a tea or a coffee or something, sit yourself down and enjoy the ride. Anyway, here we go. Here I'm marking out the rear side of this rail. It's too thick really to dovetail all the way through at 40mm, so I'm going to remove part of the back side. So I'm just marking the baseline here. That will be sawn out later. And here you can see me marking out the baselines for the smaller teeth of the houndstooth dovetail. I'm using a pointy marking knife because it can get right into the corners. You can use a marking gauge, but it's got a much rounder blade, so I wouldn't recommend that. But if that's all you've got, then that's what you have to use. But certainly a pointy tool is helpful here. And here I'm just chiseling out a V-groove along the baseline shoulder line of the section that I'm going to cut out of the rear side. I'll come back to this later, but this is really for the tenon saw to fall into when I'm cutting across the grain. Now, because the board is over 6 foot long, I have to angle it in the vise so I can cut the back off this dovetailed end. So now we come back to cross-cutting the end off, and you can see that the V-groove that I chiselled out earlier is now allows the tenon saw to fall in and up against the shoulder line. Although I'm not sawing straight to the or directly on the shoulder line. I'm too chicken for that. And I would say my hand tool skills are probably not quite up there with the machine tool skills that I seem to know better. And so using the router plane here, we can basically take the dovetail end part to the correct thickness that we require, which, if I remember rightly, was about 25mm. I can't remember now. So yeah, this tool is invaluable. Now all my pressure is going down on my right hand to keep it as stable as possible. I could have used an offcut of the of this piece of timber to balance it across the part which was being routed, but I seem to get away with it. And because I was too chicken to saw right to the shoulder line that I'd marked earlier, I'm now removing and paring back what's left. And the good thing about this is that you can check with a small square, adjustable square, and you can ensure that you are leaving the shoulder line perfect. And here we are, we've come to sawing the angled parts of these dovetails, and this was tricky because the board is so long, it's over 6 foot long, so you have to hold it in the vise at an angle, you have to saw at the angle, and I normally would do this with the line that I'm sawing vertical in the vise, but you can see here it's very tricky. And you have to keep looking behind to make sure you don't go over the line, although at the back of this houndstooth it doesn't matter if I go beneath the scribed line too much because that will be hidden, but certainly this front facing one is essential to get right. When I say scribed line, I mean the scribed baseline of the dovetails, so of course you have to make sure that you're sawing directly 90 degrees across the end of the board. That's really important as well. Here we have to put the saw in the slot that we made in the first half of the piece that you're going to remove, so you don't want to widen this slot, you want to use it to create the second part of the triangle, if you like, as you can see here. Telltale differences between machined dovetails and handmade is that it's very difficult to get a router bit to create a slot the width of a saw blade. So I'm using the coping saw here to remove all the triangular pieces of waste by cutting just above the baseline for each piece of waste. I'll come back and clean the baselines up with a chisel, as you'll see in a moment. So there's 2 more pieces of waste here that you have to remove, as you can see with the penciled crosses on, and I just saw them off, not directly to the line but as close as possible, and then I'll pare it back later. you hear that ping on my smartphone there? That was probably a message from my wife saying, I'm in the supermarket, do you need anything? Do you get that? Do you get messages like that? I do. So you may notice that I use my little square just to square up the chisel before I hammer the chisel in. I'm trying to be just off from 90 degrees actually, so I lean the chisel forward slightly, 1 or 2 degrees, doesn't really matter, and I only go halfway into the thickness of the dovetail. That way I attack it from both sides, and if there's like a small divot in the middle, then you'll never see that at the end of the day. That will be covered up and hidden. It's essential to use your square, and in this case I'm using a Sterling Toolworks double square, which is adjustable and has this very narrow blade, which is ideal for this kind of detailed dovetailing work. And that gets right in and checks that the faces on the inside of the waist, where the waist has been removed from, are straight across. Now you can see the front row with the completed dovetails now positioned on top of the end cap where we want to mark out for the pins. So I'm using a blue spruce marking knife here with a very long blade, and this is essential for this because you've got about 1 inch of thickness of material. It's a single beveled blade, but the problem is with this is that the bevel is going to be on the side of the walnut, which you want to keep, so you only want to give a very light cut here. You don't want the bevel to go in really deeply. And also when we get to the ends here, I mark the main section here, as you can see, and then in a photograph in a second I'll show you a little trick where I use a feeler gauge, put it in the slot. Here you go. So the feeler gauge prevents the knife from going across the slot part. And this is the fun part where you get to cut the pins, and of course you've got to be really careful with the placement of the saw. Keep it nice and straight and keep your movement nice and straight. and here you can remove quite a large amount of waste just by drilling 4 holes very, very carefully. So here you can see that I've cut most of the top section out, which leaves it just shy of the small houndstooth. Now it's just a question of using a variety of chisels to remove the waste and being very careful about it. These are Ashley Isles chisels, specifically dovetail chisels, and they have a profile which is has a sort of rounded cross section which gets right into the corners of the dovetails without damaging them. So I would say these are really worth getting, or something similar. Don't try and do this with bevel edge chisels. And if you're interested in more details on how to learn how to cut these houndstooth dovetails, then I will put a link up here and suggest that you look at Frank Strazzer's excellent videos where I got a lot of the help that I needed to do this job. I'll also put a link above here to my houndstooth dovetails that I did in 3 coffee tables that I made in 2016. So please click on the link above if you're interested in that. This gave me plenty of practice. The way I approach this is to get the waste out as much as possible up onto your scribed lines, and then remove the final part very, very carefully. You want less than 1 millimetre of waste remaining for your final pairing. Here I've just paired down to the baseline of the dovetail now. As you can see now, I'm right on it. Just get your the blade of your chisel right in there and go in straight, and that's pretty much all you have to do. An aptly named song here, named Believe. Believe, and you can do it. So I've partially knocked it in here to see how it fits dry, and it looks pretty good, but unfortunately when I came to fit it to the rest of the bench, the dovetails moved, and I think what happened was the dominoes locked the rail in a certain position, even though I put elongated slots in on the rail, I think, so that the rail could slide backwards and forwards, you know, to and from the end cap. But unfortunately something happened during glue up, and the learning from this was that I think the dovetail should have been glued to the end cap first, and then the end cap and the rail then glued to the rest of the rear section of the bench. But anyway, I ended up having to fill the dovetails. It's not great, but it's acceptable. And this is before final cleanup and finishing, so not too bad, and actually it turned out quite well in the end, as you'll see at the end of the video series. Well, thank you for watching, and look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thanks for watching, and if you like what you see here and you're new to this channel, please subscribe for more updates as they come available. Otherwise you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter or Pinterest, so that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. See you again.